Okay, getting ready for the quiz on slope-intercept form. Number 1 and 2 are very similar, so let's go through them both, and then we'll get into the 3 problems at the bottom. All right, now number 1 and number 2, I guess, really, you have to rearrange the equation from what's currently standard form into slope-intercept form. Now, slope-intercept form is y equals mx plus b. So we can accomplish this by simply trying to isolate the y on the left side of the equal sign and canceling out the 5x and the 3, or in a sense trying to just move these two terms, or those two things, to the other side of the equation. Now, this involves 2 steps, and I'm going to write these down. So step 1, we're going to move the x term. Okay, move the x term. And now, because the x term here is a positive, as in a positive 5x, right? In order to cancel it out and move it, we'd have to subtract 5x, because 5x minus 5x will become 0 and then cancel out, and it won't be on that side anymore. But if we do that to the left side, we have to do this to the right side. So now our equation is 3y equals, now here on the right side we have these two terms. We have 9 and negative 5x. Now, you can't put them together. You can't combine them because they're not like terms, so don't try to say 4 or 4x or anything like that. You just have to keep those two terms separate. And I'm going to keep the x term first, and since it's a negative, I'm going to write negative 5x. And then I'm going to write plus 9, and I'm writing plus 9 because the 9 is a positive. If the 9 were negative, I'd write minus 9, but since it's a positive 9, that's the reason why I have plus 9, to indicate that it's positive. And now the second step that I'm going to do is divide the number by y. So the only other number there, right, the only other thing that we need to deal with in order to have the y by itself is this 3. So since it's being multiplied to y, we will divide by 3. And of course, we do that to the left side, then we have to do it to the right side as well. So we'll cancel that 3 out, and we'll get y is equal to, now here's the thing, okay? Now we have this fraction, right? Negative 5 divided by 3. Now that doesn't work, right? That's a decimal if you were to try to type that in the calculator. But we don't want the decimal. In fact, we prefer it to just leave it as that fraction. We're not going to simplify that fraction any. We're not going to try and change it to a decimal. I want to leave it just the way it is, as a negative 5 over 3 for my x term. However, the second term, the 9 divided by 3, we can simplify, and we should simplify. 9 divided by 3 is 3, so that's going to turn into 3 right there. Okay, and that's because, remember, 9 divided by 3 is 3. All right, so my answer, my slope-intercept form is y equals negative 5/3 x plus 3. Now, from this information, the negative 5/3 is my m value, right? Because if you're thinking y equals mx plus b, the negative 5/3 is m. So that is my slope, negative 5 over 3. And then my y-intercept, let's use a different color here. My y-intercept is this positive 3, which is my b value, right? That's my y-intercept. So I'm just going to write that down as my b value, 3. Now, what we're going to do here is, now we got to graph it, but we have the information that we need. We know the y-intercept is 3. Now that's my starting point. So remember, the x-axis is the one that goes horizontally, y-axis is vertically. We're looking to start at 3 on the y-intercept. So on the y-axis, we're going to find positive 3. Now, 0 is down here in the center, of course, so we count up 3. There's our y-intercept at 3. Now our slope, remember, is negative 5 over 3. Remember that slope is a rise over run. So the top number indicates rise, meaning my up or down shift, and then my bottom number indicates my run, which is my lateral left or right shift. Now, since my rise is a negative number, rather than going up, a negative would indicate that my rise would be actually going down. And my run is 3, and it's a positive 3, indicating that we'd run towards positive values, which would be to the right. So our slope is down 5 and right 3. So what we're going to do is we're going to count squares from here. We're going to count down 5 squares. So let me use a different color just to indicate. Now, you don't want to write on your paper, right? You just trace, but since you can't see me trace, I'm actually just going to write on the paper, but I will erase it. We're going to count down 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 spaces, and then write 3. 1, 2, 3. Okay, and that ends up over here at this point. Okay, so the blue line is what I would trace. I wouldn't actually write that on my paper, but I wanted you guys to see me counting, so I wrote it down. And then we would follow that same thing. We do this until we get a longer line, because right now we can kind of tell where the line's going to be, but it's not long enough. So we're going to count again, right? Count down 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and then write 1, 2, 3. And we're going to put our point there. Okay? So you kind of get the idea. Where you're going down 5, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and right 3, we get another point there. And if you want to go backwards, right, we want to trace the rest of this line onto the left side, right? Do the opposite of going down and right, go up and left, okay? And that will cover the same cost. So up, we'll go up 5 and then left 3, and that'll cover the opposite version, the backwards side of this line. So up 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And left 1, 2, 3. So that puts our point here. And then maybe we can do one more, get our last point there. So there's your line. Now you can go ahead and trace it all the way through. And that's number 1 complete for you. Okay? All right, so now let's do number 2. So number 2, same idea. So I'm going to go through it a little bit quicker. But it's the same exact process, same 2 steps. So step number 1 is move the x term. Now, I do see this negative here, but that negative, that minus sign is with the 5, okay? It's not with the 2. This 2 is a positive 2, and because I want to get rid of it, I'm going to subtract 2, because positive 2 minus 2 would become a 0. So it doesn't really matter what this sign is. I think a lot of people would think, oh, there's a minus sign, so shouldn't you add 2x? And no, not really, because the 2 doesn't have the minus sign. The 5 does, but the 2 doesn't. So we're subtracting 2, and that cancels out because positive 2 minus 2 is 0. So this is negative 5y equal to negative 2x plus 15. Again, I just keep these 2 terms separated. The negative is with the 2x, the positive is with the 15. So now, step 2, divide by this negative 5. So everything gets divided by negative 5, and on the left side, we just have y. Now, the right side, we have these 2 fractions we got to simplify. Now, you'll notice the 2 fifths here. Now, just like the last problem, we're not going to simplify that. We're not going to, what am I going to say? We're not going to change it to a decimal. However, you can leave it as negative 2 over negative 5 if you want, but a double negative, okay? It only applies to double negatives, not like the last problem. The last problem did not have a double negative. But a double negative cancels out, becomes positive. So you can actually write this as both a positive 2 and a positive 5. That's what you can do, because the 2 negatives that are here will cancel each other out. But over here, there is no double negative. We have a positive 15 divided by a negative 5, and this ends up to be a negative 3, okay? So our answer here is y equals 2 fifths x minus 3. So let's see, let's use the highlighter. My m is my 2 fifths. That's, going back to this over here. My m is 2 fifths, and my negative 3 or my minus 3 is my b value. That's my y-intercept. So the slope here is that 2 fifths, and the y-intercept is that negative 3. Now on the graph, remember, we start with our b value. We start with our y-intercept. So our y-axis, remember, is the vertical one. So on this vertical axis, we're going to go counting down to negative 3. So if 0 is in the middle, negative 3 is going to be 3 below it, so right here. And now our slope, remember, is 2 over 5. So remember, rise, and remember, run. So a positive 2 would indicate up, and a positive 5 indicates right. So we're going to go up 2 and right 5. So let's count, and I'll show you guys me counting real quick. Let me change this color. We count up 2, 1, 2, and then right 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. That puts our next point here, right? And then count up 2 and right 5 again, and you should be ending up here. And if you want to go backwards, then do the opposite. Go down 2 and left 5. Which, by the way, if you had kept it as a negative 2 and a negative 5 originally, you would be going down 2 and left 5, right? So it's still the same trend. It's just you kind of would have started backwards. But it's still the same direction. Down 2, left 5 puts you here. Down 2, left 5 puts you here. and you kind of complete your full line. All right, so now let's look at number 3. Okay, number 3 is a very simple one. So remember, slope-intercept form is y equals mx plus b. We've said this before. M is counted our slope number, and b is counted as our y-intercept number. Now, this problem tells us what both of those numbers are. So my answer is just going to be y equals negative 4x plus 1. The negative 4 is the slope value it gave me, so I put that for the m. And the 1 was the y-intercept it gave me, so I put that for the b. And I've got my equation, y equals negative 4x plus 1. So remember, your answer on all of these is going to be some equation that looks like this, right? Y equals mx plus b, y equals mx plus b. The problem is, do we know what the m value is? Do we know what the b value is? If we can find those two things, then I'll change them and put them in the equation. Okay, but our answer will be that. Essentially, we just need those two values, though. We need to know the m, which is the slope, and the b, which is the y-intercept. Now, in number 4, look, it does already tell me the slope, right? It tells me the slope is negative 1/2. So right away, I already have my m value. So I'm going to go ahead and change that down here, right? Negative 1/2. That's my m value. But what it doesn't give me, it does not give me the y-intercept like the last problem did. It gives me a point, but this point is not the y-intercept. This is x and this is y. Neither of these are b. Okay, so not b, not the y-intercept. So here's how we find b. Okay, so remember your general equation, y equals mx plus b, right? Well, remember that this slope is our m value. Oops. 3 instead of 2, all right? But also remember that we can use this point here. Negative 4 is x, so we can actually plug that negative 4 in for that x value. And this 5 is a y, so we're actually going to plug this 5 in for the y. But remember, we can't plug anything in for b, so I'm just going to leave this as plus b. So you'll notice we have a y value, we have an m value, and we have an x value, because that's what we were given in the beginning of this problem. But what I don't have is a b value, so I left it as just a b value. So now we're just going to calculate this. We're going to try and isolate the b value, because if whatever b is equal to, that will be the answer that I'm going to plug down here in for that b value. So let's do some math. Now, negative 1/2 times negative 4. Maybe grab a calculator, but half of 4 is 2. Negative times a negative is a positive, so this ends up to be a positive 2. So we have 5 is equal to 2 plus b. Okay, so just to recap real quick, negative 1/2 times negative 4 is equal to a positive 2. So now we have just a little bit of math left to do, which is just subtract this 2 in order to cancel it out so that the b could be all by itself. So now the b is all by itself because the 2 is gone, and 5 minus 2 is 3. So now I know b is equal to 3, so I can use that, put that information in there, and have my final answer. My final answer is b is equal to a positive 3, so plus 3. Let me go back and re-highlight it as well. So there's my b value. Okay, so remember the b value, if you go back to the beginning, the b was not given to us, right? What never told us 3 was the b value, but it gave us an m, an x, and a y, and we used that information in order to solve and find b. Okay, so now the last problem. We need to find m and b, because none of this stuff it gives me is my slope, and none of it is my b. So I can't plug anything in right away because it doesn't give me anything right away. But what I have is I have 2 points. I have xy and I have xy. Now, what I can do is use my slope formula. So my slope formula will give me the m value. And m is equal to this formula. It's going to be y minus y over x minus x. So we have 2 y values. We also have 2 x values. So we're going to subtract them from each other and then simplify the fraction that it gives me, and we'll have our slope. So I'm going to subtract, remember the y is on top. So negative 1. I'm going to subtract negative 3. So we're going to have negative 1 minus, remember that minus sign is part of the formula, and then we're subtracting a negative 3. Okay, so keep that in mind. And on the bottom, we're subtracting the x values. So the x values are -5 and 5. So we're doing -5, subtracting, because that's the subtraction sign, 5. So be very careful, especially with all these negatives, okay? Because -1 minus -3 is the same as -1 plus 3, and actually the numerator ends up being just a +2. And on the bottom, the denominator, be really careful about this because it seems like they cancel, but they don't. -5 minus 5 is actually -10. So that's our slope. This is the m value now. Now, if you want to, you can go ahead. If you want to put it in a decimal form, you can. But a simplified version of this would be -1/5. And if you're wondering how I got that, I'm reducing this fraction because I can divide both of these by 2. It's just simplifying. It's just simplifying a fraction. I can divide 2 and 10 by 2, which turns the top into 1 and the bottom into 5, right? And it's a negative, remember, so I put that negative as part of my fraction. So that's my m value. I can put that in my answer, -1/5. Or you can write, if you did it in a calculator, you would do 2 divided by -10, and it would give you -0.2. You can use that for the m value instead if you want to. I won't count it wrong. But the thing is, we still don't have the b value, right? We have the m value, but we don't have the b value. So we're going to do kind of what we did in number 4, which is use what we do know. We know the m value now. We know it's -1/5, or you can use this decimal version of it, -0.2. So I'll write both of them in case you want to use either one. -1/5 and -0.2. Decimal version or fraction version, whichever you want. We know the m value, right? And we also know an x and y value. We know a point, right? We can use either one of these points. I'm going to use this one. Okay, so I'll use that y as -1 and this -5 for x. So I'm going to just plug those in for the x and the y. So x was -5. I'm going to plug in -5 for my x. Again, I'm going to do this both ways depending on whichever way you want to do it. Okay, and I'm also going to plug in -1 for the y. So -1, that's because of this point right here, -1. So either way you want to use a fraction or a decimal, you should get the same calculations. Okay, this ends up to be a -1 equals +1 plus b. And you would get the same result, of course, if you use a decimal. So this would end up being a +1. So let me highlight this for you so you can see it a little bit better. So -1/5 times -5 is 1. Okay, same thing here. -0.2 times -5 is 1. Same thing, just fraction version or decimal version, they still give you the same result. So now when you solve it, you would subtract 1 in order to cancel that 1 out. Make sure you do that on both sides, and you're going to get the same result, which is -2 is equal to b. Okay, so -2 is equal to b. Either way you wanted to do it. So now I'm going to put that final answer in my equation. -2 is my b value. Let me go back and highlight it. Right? Back also, my slope was -1/5 because that was given me earlier. You could also have used -0.2 as a slope if you wanted to. So if you wrote the answer as y equals -0.2x minus 2, that would be fine with me, okay? But either way, it's the same thing. It wouldn't matter to me, okay, how you did it. But remember those steps, okay? So notice in the last 3 problems, kind of the increase in difficulty, right? The first one, hardly any work because it basically gave you the entire answer. Second one, quite a little bit of work, but you already started with the m value and you had to work to find the b value. The last problem is a lot of work because you had to find the m value first and then you had to find the b value second before you could write your answer out. So that's everything that you need to know. I hope you guys do well. Good luck. I'll see you later.